Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell here, and today I have some absolutely huge news when it comes to the various benefit programs that have been in place since the beginning of the pandemic. Today, in a press conference, Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland revealed what exactly they're going to be doing about the extension of these benefits, and as a spoiler for you here, they're canceling the CRB. It will no longer be active at the end of October, but they are extending to other benefits that have previously existed, and they've created an entirely new benefit. So in today's video, we're going to take a closer look at this press conference. We're going to hear right from Chrystia Freeland and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau what they had to say, and I'm going to do my best to break it down for you so you can know exactly what's going on, what we know for sure, and what there's still a couple questions about. But before we do, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and of course use the links in the description to support the channel. There's options there for opening up investing accounts, for buying cryptocurrency, and learning more about how you can do both of those things to increase your wealth long term. Now let's get into a little bit of the context of what we're about to hear here. One key piece of information that you need to know before we listen in on this press conference is the difference between regulation and legislation. If you've followed the channel for a while, you probably already know this, but legislation is a way that the government can change rules, but it makes them have to go through the House of Commons and through Senate in order to make these changes. Now, there's another way that they can make changes called regulation, and this is something that allows them to make tweaks and changes to their current policy because they've written in flexibility into previous legislation or previous bills, previous laws. So there's a difference between regulation, easy to do, and legislation, hard to do. You have to take it through the House of Commons. We'll talk more about that in a second, but let's listen in here on what Chrystia Freeland has to say on this brand new announcement.
Thankfully, as the Prime Minister has just pointed out, we're now in a new phase, one that is very different from the darkest days in our fight against COVID. We have recovered lost jobs, vaccination rates are high, and will get higher as it becomes possible to vaccinate more of our children. Borders are reopening, and the fourth wave appears to be coming under control in many parts of the country. Last month, as the Prime Minister has just reminded us, we reached our goal, as promised in last year's throne speech, of creating 1 million jobs. Canada has now recovered 100% of the jobs lost in the depth of the COVID recession. And compare that to the United States, which has only recovered 78%. Children are back in school. We have accomplished all of this together while sticking to health restrictions that have saved lives. Our economy is rebounding, and we are winning the fight against COVID. However, it's also true that the recovery is uneven and that the health measures that are saving lives continue to restrict some economic activity. That is why today we are announcing what we very much hope and believe is the final pivot in delivering the support needed to ensure a robust recovery. The existing income and business support programs will end on October 23rd, as previously announced. We are moving from the very broad-based support that was appropriate at the height of our lockdowns to more targeted measures that will provide help where it is needed while prudently managing government finances.
So here, of course, Chrystia Freeland lays out a bunch of stats and data to make her decision look good, saying that we've recovered 100% of jobs since the depths of the COVID pandemic, and that we've created 1 million new jobs since that depth, something that the Liberals promised to do quite a while ago, and she uses this to back up her decision to cancel the CRB and to not extend it further. Now, after this clip, she goes into a little bit of detail about business supports. Essentially, what they're doing is they're lowering the amount of business support that businesses will be able to receive unless they are in specific lockdowns in individual areas. But what she announces next is a brand new program called the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit. Let me show you exactly what she has to say here about this new Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, or CWLB, as well as an extension for the CRCB and the CRSB. I'll break that down a little bit more in a minute.
Temporary local lockdowns are still a possibility in the months to come. We want Canadians to know that we intend now to put in place a measure that would snap into action immediately to support workers in the event of a new local lockdown. As the CRB has done up until now, this new benefit, the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, would provide $300 a week to workers who are subject to a lockdown, including those who are ineligible for employment insurance. We also know that Canadians across the country may need continued support from the Canada Sickness Benefit and the Canada Caregiving Benefit. We all need to protect ourselves and one another by staying home when we're sick. And our children, many of whom still cannot be vaccinated, are particularly vulnerable, which means parents may need to be able to stay home to take care of them. So, we intend to extend eligibility for both of these benefits until May 7th of next year, and will increase the maximum duration of each benefit by 2 additional weeks.
So some pretty big announcements here. We have the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, an all-new benefit, $300 per week or $1,200 per month for people who are affected by a lockdown, workers subject to lockdown. This is the language that they're using, as well as the CRCB and the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, the CRSB, being extended until May 7th of next year. But this extension until May 7th is a little bit of a misnomer because they're extending the program that long, but they're not providing additional weeks, more than just 2 additional weeks for these programs. So if you had already exhausted these benefits in the past, you're only getting an actual extension of 2 weeks. But if you're somebody who's applying for the first time, well, you could have the full eligibility all the way out until May 7th of 2022. But this is where the whole regulation versus legislation issue comes in that I mentioned before. If you'll remember, regulation, super easy to pass. You can just make the decision because it's written into the legislation that you can make these changes. If it's legislation, they have to take it through the House of Commons, get support because it's a minority government, get support from enough people in the House of Commons that they can pass the vote with a majority, as well as get that passed through the Senate, which, as you know, if you followed this channel, that can take quite a long time at certain points. And as far as I'm aware, this extension to the CRCB and the CRSB, as well as of course the creation of a Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, well, this is all brand new stuff that hasn't been written into something that they're able to regulate or change easily. This is something that they're going to have to take through the House of Commons and take through the Senate. Again, this can take quite a long time, and that's complicated even more when you recognize that recently Justin Trudeau announced that he was delaying the amount of time or delaying the date that they would be able to resume the House of Commons and resume debate around these things all the way until November 22nd. So as of right now, the earliest that these programs could be debated and potentially passed is that week of November 22nd. And even though we have the clarity now that the CRB will be ending and we have this new potential, if it can pass through the House of Commons, Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit coming into place, we're not going to get details about that Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit likely until that legislation is tabled in the House of Commons. And of course, on this channel, we'll go over it, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you can know when this information actually comes out. But we don't know how you're going to qualify for the Canada Workers Lockdown Benefit, how they're going to target it for individual areas, how this is all going to function. We just don't have the information yet. All we have is Chrystia Freeland getting up here behind the podium saying this is what we're going to do, but no details on what that actually looks like. Just after Christia's announcement, Justin Trudeau in this same press conference was questioned by one of the reporters saying, hey, why are you pushing back the House of Commons sitting until November 22nd when you could be getting to work right now on putting these programs into place, as well as many other things that the government is trying to do? And his reason for this was that some members of parliament, likely from the Conservative Party, at least Justin Trudeau was emphasizing, are not vaccinated yet. And he wants to make it so that when they go back to the House of Commons, that they're able to do it fully in person with everyone with both vaccinations. And he says that by extending this date out into November 22nd, some politicians who may not have chosen to get vaccinated, well, they'd have the ability to get fully vaccinated since that announcement that he wanted it to be a fully vaccinated House of Commons. They'd have the time to get both doses and be there on time for the first sitting. Next, a reporter brings up this point that, hey, these benefits are set to end in 3 days. How are people going to transition into this new program? What's your thinking around this? You're announcing it 3 days before this potential end of all these benefits, or the guaranteed now end of all of these benefits. What's your plan here? What are you thinking? And here's the response. Let me know what you think of it.
I have a question about the benefits program that was announced today. I think it's easy to see how businesses would transition based on the benchmarks that have been announced, but for individuals relying on the CRB for income support, moving entirely to a lockdown workers benefit. How do they transition? What are the criteria? Is this only for places under harsh local lockdowns, or people who are just unable to go back to work in a particular sector? How do they get income support under these new measures that start in just 3 days?
That's an excellent question, and it's something that the Minister and I have spoken about extensively over the past number of weeks, and I'll turn it over to her. But just to say that we are ensuring that we are both continuing to be there for Canadians, to have people's backs as we've always said they would, while ensuring that the economy comes roaring back. And that's the principle that we're building on right now. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chrystia to speak to more details on this transition.
These programs were conceived from the outset, and I think clearly and broadly understood by Canadians as unprecedented emergency support measures that were there because we did an astonishing thing as a country. We decided to close down our economy to save lives. We have now recovered 100% of the jobs lost in the pandemic. Now, there is still work to do to get to the employment and labor force participation levels that we want to achieve. When it comes to income support, if the fourth wave or some unexpected additional wave were to hit us, we want public health authorities to know, and we want workers to know that that support will be there. It will be there, and we'll be able to snap back into place immediately for workers. That's the key element. A lot of people have depended on the sickness benefit and the caregiver benefit during the pandemic. The need for that continues, and we are extending that benefit and adding 2 additional weeks. And then the final thing I would point to as support for workers and jobs is our extension of the Canada Hiring Recovery Benefit. This is really important in terms of driving job creation, creating additional spaces for workers. And one element that people have been pointing to, I think rightly, about the jobs recovery is that there are some people who are working but are maybe not working as many hours as they would like. The Recovery Hiring Benefit can be used by employers to give workers who are on the payroll now additional hours. So those are the support measures we have in place to help workers and to drive the best possible support for a Canadian is actually a job. And that's what these programs are designed to really promote.
So a lot of information from Chrystia Freeland there, but not a lot of clarity. She says that they want this new workers lockdown support to be able to snap into place in certain situations, but doesn't give any detail around what those situations are, who would be eligible, and doesn't bring up the fact that, well, the program can't exist until November 22nd when they get back to the House of Commons to actually pass this through in the form of legislation. She also points to the CRCB extension, CRSB extension. Same goes for them. Those can't really be extended past November at the very least until they're back in the House of Commons and can make changes to this legislation. So some issues there, of course, you can see. She also brings up the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. She calls it the Canada Recovery Hiring Benefit, but to the best of my knowledge, it's CRHP, but that's beside the point. She brings up this program, which is a support for businesses, small business owners, to receive extra funding so that they can hire on more staff or give existing staff more hours. But this is a little bit of a problematic thing, even though she says that it's support for Canadians, or the best support for Canadians is to actually have a job. There's not really a ton of clarity around what businesses need to specifically do with this money. It certainly needs to go back to workers, but they could hire on more smaller part-time workers and not actually provide those extra hours that she says that they are able to do. But there's no real guidelines on how that can work and how this kind of funding could trickle down to the average Canadian. So in summary, we've got a whole bunch of new information, but no clarity. This is the theme right now, but hopefully over the coming days, we may get a press conference, or at least a press release coming out of the Minister of Finance's office, giving us a little more clarity on how this might exactly work. And of course, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, because that'll notify you whenever I post a video like this, so that as soon as more information about this stuff comes out, you're going to be the first one to know about it. And while you're down there, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of all this. list. I read every single one and try to get back to as many as I can. And of course, check out the links in the description. Anytime you use one of those links, it helps support this channel and helps the continuation of more content like this to be created. There's options down there for opening up investing accounts. You can get 2 free stocks when you open up a Wealthsimple account, as well as options for buying cryptocurrency and learning more about building your wealth through investing through the Canada Money Mastery program. All of those support the channel. But with all that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.